Okay, so hello, Jack, and thank
Hello.
you for joining this interview.
Thank you.
And hello to everyone who is gonna watch this interview. So we're here to explain how Gestalt is an anarchist psychotherapy method. I want to say a few words before I start interviewing Jack and explain why I'm doing this. So as probably you know, I'm a Gestalt therapist and I'm very focused in creating ways on how we can heal our internalized capitalism and patriarchy. And I'm very thankful to the people who started this method because it's the only social, political, aware psychotherapy method that started in the 50s in USA from a group of people. And as I have also discovered in my practice as client and therapist, also having our friend and colleague in common, Bud Fieder, as my supervisor for the last years that he was with us on this planet, I confirmed, not really discovered, but I confirmed that humans, we can only really be healthy in all levels when we combine emotional and social political awareness. And yeah, I'm thankful to Gestalt because actually that they started by putting this, this, I don't know how to call it, but by contributing this to psychotherapy world. And I just want to say, before I start asking Jack, that he also has written 2 books where he explains this very analytically, that in the first group of Gestalt people in the 50s, we had one anarchist of the time, Paul Goodman, that he was very active in the anti-war movement of the time, not only, but also in that, plus a couple from Germany, Fritz and Laura Perls, that they were very active in the anti-fascist movement in Germany in their time, before Hitler came on power. So, yeah, I want to imply here or say directly that I think as Gestalt therapists, I would feel, I don't know how to say it, but I would feel better if we would follow an equal path. And that's what I'm doing, of course. And I hope more of us do the same from our community and from this planet in general. So that was the prologue here. So I want to give you the word and give your own prologue on this case, under the topic Gestalt and Anarchism.
Oh, Gestalt and anarchy, right. Well, I think the issue we all have to face when we start talking about Gestalt and anarchy is to clarify the terms in a manner that's separate and apart from the way a lot of them have been misused over the years.
Exactly.
Right. So the first one is that anarchism is not anarchy. Anarchy is more a phrase that has been derived from that word, but explains more in the way of unthinking power, of just doing what you want, this spontaneity, where anarchism is a very specific philosophical viewpoint that has been with us since about the early part of the 19th century. So Michael Vincent Miller, an anarchist thinking Gestalt therapist, also indicated it's not the absence of order, it's the absence of authority.
Can you repeat can you start again this phrase, because someone called and there was a mute moment.
Someone's what? I'm sorry.
So you left, you were saying that anarchism is something that started when?
Oh, in about the early part of the 19th century. And it was basically a political movement that incorporated what then was communism, which of course is not the same as it was back then. Also libertarianism, which is not the same as it was back then, and socialism, which probably remains as constant as it was back then of all of those three subgroups of what we would associate with anarchism. And it's important to understand that, because I don't know how it's in Greece or other countries, but here anarchy is seen as, you know, the evil incarnate. And it's QAnon, you know, we hear this about, has nothing to do with anarchy in the very historical and philosophical and political arenas. So it's important to get that straight. It's also considered radical, another term that has been misconstrued and continues to be misconstrued in terms of its meaning. If you look in the dictionary about an explanation or definition for the term radical, it involves getting to the center of things, getting to the meat of the matter. It's not, you know, going so far to the left nobody can see you anymore.
Exactly.
And the first person who described himself as an anarchist was a Frenchman named Pierre-Joseph Proudhon. And he felt that the best definition of anarchy was a libertarian form of socialism. Again, back in those definitions, back in those words. He worked to achieve a world federation that would ensure that everyone could be as free as possible living in community with others. And another common element that's so important in anarchism is the idea that all communication and all elements of influence follow horizontal lines, not vertical ones. That's what Michael Vincent Miller means by authority. Authority is an artificial creation and an unnecessary element in structuring not just political issues or civic issues, but any issues at all. And it eventually leads to what we see in today's world. You know, the people at the top start to rot, and the people at the bottom tend to revolt. And then we have new. And one of the things that separates anarchism from Marxism is what the Marxists are looking for is a change in the organization. What anarchism is looking for is a lack of organization and more in the way of horizontal communication and sharing with others in making policies that influence society and are not dictated by special envoys or people who are considered to be in the know, so to speak, because that just changes the horizontal back to the vertical. And Pierre-Joseph Proudhon was the first person to call himself an anarchist and started the movement, again, in relationship to what was then known as libertarian and also socialism. The second guy was Mikhail Bakunin, who was a very volatile.
What was the name?
Mikhail, Mikhal. And he believed in a collectivist type of anarchy where people of similar beliefs work together to form this kind of confederation and unity and horizontal communication.
You mean Michael Bakunin?
Yeah, Michael Bakunin.
Yeah.
And one phrase that he made was very important, not only in and of itself, but also in terms of getting a flavor of the spirit of anarchism. He said, "The freedom of all is essential to my freedom." And that's, that has heavy political implications to it if you stay with that, just that one sentence for a while. And the one that influenced Paul Goodman mostly was an anarchist named Peter Kropotkin. Peter Kropotkin was also known as Prince Peter Kropotkin, but he was from Russia. And his main contributions to anarchy and to also animal husbandry was showing that, unlike what Darwin thought, that animals get along better by cooperation than they do by the survival of the fittest. And Goodman could apply that to human community as well. That was his stance. And it was the first one that represented a holistic type of ecologically based philosophy and feeling. And it was a political community functioning with a natural sense of connections between people. And those of you who have read Goodman, his whole idea was on nature heals. That was a book that he wrote, which was a complement of a lot of his essays, and that's what we in Gestalt therapy believe. You know, you don't have to get sick to be better. You can be better and get better still, because if you trust the fact that you've got what it takes, organismic self-regulation, to be in this world in a very functional and nurturing way. And given the fact that holism was a very big piece of the pie for Kropotkin, of course, influenced Goodman, because holism was one of his philosophical mandates that he learned in studying John Dewey at the University of Chicago. But these are guys, don't forget, that were all born back in the 19th century. And they don't have many, there are some people who have followed, but not with the same level of influence that they had back then. And they did pay for that influence, some of them paid for that influence with their lives.
What do you mean by that?
Well, there was a lot of animosity against the libertarian and the anarchist of those years, because they would stand.
You mean like the Chicago of '86, for example?
Yes, exactly. Right.
Which is the reason why we have this day of 1st of May, which is not a celebration, but it's an honor for these workers who claimed the right for people to work less, right?
Right, to work less, shorter hours during the day, union representation for only 5 days a week, not 7, and no exploitation above and beyond what that the description of the job mandated. In other words, you do what you get paid for, and do that. And by the way, a lot of it, you know, there's still a bunch of people that really rely on free market as their philosophy. And so especially now with capitalism raging all over the world, particularly from the United States. When it was first proposed by Adam Smith in The Wealth of Nations, it was interesting. The Marxists even liked it, and the anarchists liked it, because in its original form, it was good for the worker, it was good for the boss, it was good for the public. Because the unions had a lot of influence, the input of workers was very not only tolerated, but encouraged. And until the Marxists kind of studied it over time, and they said, yes, a free market environment is exactly, or the most pure form we could have, but it doesn't stay that way. Because what happens, and if you follow this, I think you can follow some relevant history in most every part of the world, is that it starts out like that, and then corporations start buying each other, and you then eventually float into a corporatocracy. And then after that, whatever they're selling has saturated all of the need in a particular country. You need to expand that out beyond the boundaries of the country to other countries to fulfill your need for continued growth of profit. Then they get into the government and say, you need to protect us. And the way you protect us is to make sure that we have, let's say, with my country, is it a coincidence that all of the wars were fought around oil fields? You know,
what do they do? They have, what did you say? Can you repeat? What do they do in your country? And your country is USA, for people who don't know.
I mean, that the wars that we are fighting as Americans are mostly
Exactly.
in the Middle East near the oil wells. Well, I'm not sure there's anything near those oil wells except oil. And then that kind of progression becomes more of an autocracy than it does a democracy, and the corporations become more in the way of independent players than they are business people. And that's exactly in America, and probably in most of Europe, what's going on. I mean, if they're supporting your efforts and giving you money to support your efforts, they're going to promote your efforts, and not anything that ever had to do with a free market. So free markets are a joke, but they're a very dangerous joke, and they're still going on.
Exactly. And actually, as you said, because also I have this degree, I'm international expert in economy, law, relationships, and all this capitalist stuff. So I will confirm what you said, that originally the idea of the free market could be in our favor in a way,
Right.
but this would, I think it could only work if we would inform and if we would be all aware that economy is always doing some circles, and there is the up and down.
All right, but a natural rhythm.
Exactly. So if we would all be aware of that, and we would know that sometimes we have more food, let's say, and sometimes we have less food, and
Right.
people, that's the thing, be aware of that, because actually that's what happens also when you cultivate the land, and that is normal. Sometimes you have better food, more because the weather is better, I don't know what. Sometimes you have less, but if we are aware of that, we can protect our community of humans. But in that case, the problem is that there are some people, as you said, because it's about autoritocracy, how you called it, because there are some people who want to be above of the other humans, and actually they want to steal the resources of other humans instead of sharing them, which is very authoritarian and abnormal, and no other animal is doing this behavior.
And they're doing a good job of it.
They're doing a very good job. And actually what anarchists were suggesting is the most human and normal thing, like let's share all the resources equally so we can enjoy life, freedom, love, and happiness on this planet.
Right.
That's our main point, actually.
Right. And that's basically the philosophy behind anarchism.
Exactly, I totally agree. And I want to add here that the word anarchism, that it's a Greek word, and it's called in Greece is anarchia. Many people, because the media are doing this bad propaganda against anarchism everywhere, and they represent that we stand for chaos and violence, which is not at all the case. It's actually the opposite. Because actually anarchism, by definition, by etymology, means not to have an external authority, but for this to happen and coexist in a community of humans, because that's what we do, means that each one has the ability to be its own authority, or else it's not possible.
And share that with other similar organizations and people, because the authority is not a power authority.
Exactly.
It's an informational. It's
leadership.
Philosophical that can be turned into the practical problems that you just talked about, like the distribution of food. But it takes communication in that way, not that way, because those up there, right? And that's where it falls apart. That's where it falls apart. And it's not an easy philosophy to uphold. And I'll say a little more about that later. But you know, Goodman. The other issue was about Goodman being an anarchist. When I was preparing for this today, I found in my book collection this book here.
Nice.
Right. This was a copy of an article that Paul wrote for the New York Review of Books in 1968. I mean, you know, that was really, yeah. So they turned it into this form, and on the back of the page, and I think this is really interesting to hear because it covers so many areas in which Goodman was so affected by anarchistic thinking. It seems a government agency, the United States Information Agency, sent Paul Goodman a letter on September 18th, 1968. And they said, "The Black Flag of Anarchism" by Paul Goodman. We would like to reprint the above material for internal use with the U.S. Information Agency. You never do that today, by the way. With permission, we wish to reprint your article and include it along with other materials of subjects of current interest and concerns in the United States, such as the changing university, problems of the cities, trends in the arts, problems of national development. The materials, which will reflect various viewpoints, will be sent to our offices abroad for background information and reading by our public, affairs officers, and other agencies' personnel. No further distribution or republication will be authorized. Operating within a limited budget, we are permitted to offer a token payment of $25. We hope this fee will be acceptable. Thank you for your courtesy in considering our request. Here's what Paul wrote. You may reprint for your purposes my article, "The Black Flag of Anarchism." I grant this permission reluctantly because of the Vietnam War. I have been in the past few years frequently refused to cooperate with any governmental agency, including yours. But as a writer, I have an absolute obligation to allow any finished work of mine to be open to any public whatsoever, even you. However, please pay the $25 in my name to the War Resistor League at 5 Beekman Street in New York City and send me a voucher. The letter that came back.
Interesting.
Here's the letter that came back. Dear Mr. Goodman, thank you for your letter of September 20th. Though we would like to reprint your article, we are unable to accept the permission under which the terms are specified. Therefore, please cancel our request. They would not send the $25 to the War Resistors League. But
imagine.
But if you hear the rhythm of what Paul was saying in that particular article, it was very similar to the kinds of feelings and philosophies that were expressed by the anarchists back in the 19th century. And there was one anarchist that gets very little play, but his name was Murray Bookchin, Bookchin.
Murray Bookchin, yes, I know this guy.
You do
I like
know
him a lot.
And he was born in 1921 and he died in 2006. So he was probably the most contemporary representative of anarchist thought that we've recently seen. And his thing was the idea of creating a democracy requires a tremendous amount of decentralization of power and governmental influence. And one he made that these principles and practices are capable of healing within the interactions between our bodies, the community, and the environment. So what he was saying is that a healthy environment in a healthy political system creates healthy people.
Exactly. Can you repeat that? Because it's very important.
Right. He was the first psychotherapist. Yeah, he was a psychotherapist to connect decentralization and healthy ecology in both principle and practices capable of healing within the interactions between our bodies, the community, and the environment. So that's what Paul Goodman brought to the PhD book that was written in 1951, which is the foundation of Gestalt therapy. And if you read it carefully, and a lot of times, because it's not an easy book to digest, you will see the rhythm of that kind of social thinking throughout, and it's all Paul Goodman. The clinical issues are Pearls, and Laura Pearls too, who never got any credit for it. She never got any credit for a lot of stuff that Fritz did, but anyway.
Because patriarchy was very present in that time, no?
Right. Right. And she also wrote a great deal of ego, hunger, and aggression that never got noticed. But when she started on her own stuff, she was very much in that mindset. Right. And the big thing that Gestalt therapy has that allows it to include ecology and the environment into the therapy is its philosophy on self-formation. If you read that book carefully, the organism self-regulation is not the result at any contact boundary. It is of that boundary. Self is not at the environment. If it is, then it doesn't integrate. In other words, I've got a self over here and an environment over here, and I come up with something that looks like this. But if that self is of the environment, it's like this.
And it's like this, no?
Mm-hmm.
That's where we end up.
Right. And if it is like that, and we agree that self-functioning is as much a function of the environment as it is the organism, then it is grist for the mill for therapeutic intervention, because it's part of what is, of being human.
Exactly.
So that allowed Goodman to be able to see this kind of integration is not only good for political issues, but also for psychotherapeutic and psychological issues that could form other nurturing kinds of environments that would add to the health of the organ, of the individual, of the person. And he was the first person to do that. In fact, I went through the stuff and I looked at some quotes that were made by the early anarchists and also compared it to quotes that I picked up from Paul Goodman. We have Maira Kountanni, whatever you pronounce his name. He says, the passion for destruction is a creative passion. Goodman said—
the passion for distraction is?
What's that?
Can you repeat this phrase? The passion?
Yes. The passion for destruction is also a creative passion. Now, he didn't say that with Goodman hanging around because he was dead a long time before Goodman was even born. Paul Goodman once said that aggression is a sympathetic passion with desire at its heart, which is one of my favorite quotes. And the reason I think it's important is because aggression is now, for some reason, being put into such a dark place that it's equated with rage and violence, and it has nothing to do with it. And if you look at the word of destruction, how about if we call it destructuring? Wouldn't that sound very consistent with Gestalt therapy theory? It isn't ripping people or things apart. It's rearranging them into more creative wholes in larger gestalts. And that's what we do. And if you read Ego, Hunger, and Aggression, that was Fritz Perls. That wasn't Goodman. That wasn't these anarchists. That was Fritz Perls. But the overlay is very strong and very important. That, for instance, what we need is a better vocabulary for aggression. Maybe we should emulate the Eskimos up in the Inuits up in Canada. They got, I think, 120 words for snow because it snows all the time. But every word has a different feeling and a different meaning. We don't. And now we're all obsessed with microaggressions. Well, I like macroaggressions if they follow the Gestalt definition of aggression. It's destructuring what is toxic into more palatable and creative feelings and behaviors and experiences. So
actually, you are saying what we are saying together, now that we are some of the few alive anarchist Gestalt therapists, is that the self is part of the environment, and that's how it is. And then the self
is structured by the environment.
Exactly. The self is structured by the environment. And so to bring it, to bring a good image on that, we will say what the first Gestalt people also, they were saying, that we cannot only blame the client, the organism, the human for having this and that issue if we need, without talking about the environment.
Right. No, we can't.
So we cannot say that, oh, people are crazy, they are sick, they need to take pills, they need I don't know what, to go to asylums or to prison or I don't know what, if we don't, without saying that this society is sick and is producing sick people.
Yeah, right. Part of what's going on with sick people is a sick environment. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah, but you're right. But Gestalt is very unique in that way as well. And I think this was also Goodman's contribution, although I can't specifically find it, is that we don't talk about people as sick people. We don't talk diagnostically if we're smart. We don't call people names. Joe Latner, who was a very important Gestalt therapist, in his book, the Gestalt therapy book, he said, when you put your finger on a diagnosis, you're not fingering the diagnosis, you're fingering the fingering. You're just pointing to somebody and calling them a name. In Gestalt therapy, we call all of those issues creative adjustments.
Exactly.
Not that they're creative in an artistic sense, that they're beautiful.
So
they meet the difficult situation in a way that maintains the integrity of the organism.
Exactly. So we are some of the few leftovers of Gestalt therapies that we don't use psychopathology. I also don't use it. No. So I just use the word sick because it's something that is commonly used in our society. Mm-hmm. Not because we use it in our practice, to say out loud this, that if you want to talk about sick people, you need to realize that your society is sick. Sorry.
It's wrong to talk to people as sick unless they have a physical illness, and then you're only doing it in the medical sense. I mean, when I worked with Bud Peter for many, many years, he had one intervention that I really admired. That when you get into a creative adjustment, like I drank a great deal. Okay, rather than say, well, you must be an alcoholic, why don't you go to a meeting and find out a higher power? Bud would say, what did it do for you? And he said, well, it got me drunk. He said, no, what did it do for you that was positive?
Exactly, because that's how we will start, we can really support the organism. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's what we want.
And then people would think after that. And someone would say, well, it did get me away from all the noise that was going on in my house. And Bob would say, good job. He said, what do you mean it's a good job? He said, well, you imagine how crazy you were if you became part of the noise in your house? So what you did as a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, is you got into alcohol and you disappeared. Good job. At least you didn't go crazy. And it just turns things around when you say, well, we're not talking about my sickness. We're talking about my cleverness, about how I was able to escape the toxic with a minimum amount of scarring. And that just shifts their energy around in terms of a self-growth movement rather than I've got to get rid of all my nasty symptoms. No, you need to respect them for being there when you need it. I tell people all the time when they say, oh, well, this was going on and I was a kid. I said, well, why didn't you stand up at the table and just point to your family and say, look, you're all crazy. I'm out of here. I said, you're 7 years old. Where are you going? I mean, the child services will pick you up. They're probably worse than what's going on in your family. What do you want to do something like that for? Why don't we appreciate the fact that you're able to cope in an appropriate manner, given where you were and how old you were, and see how you could follow that through your life without hurting yourself as much as you had to hurt yourself back then because there wasn't any way of getting out of it.
We need to honor the creative adjustment of the organism.
Right.
And through honoring it, then we can really love our organism and ourselves and really come here and now and really create new, more appropriate creative adjustments. So we don't really have to focus so much in get rid of the old.
Right.
It's more realize where am I here and now? what have I created in my life? What can I create? And create new adjustments that fit me better.
Right. In other words, that's why Gestalt therapy, more than any other therapy,
And I think
is more aesthetic. It's aesthetic. It's like
exactly.
it's like creating a painting, a work of art, and to invite the client to participate actively in his own creative or her own creative adjustments, and to congratulate them for that, so that they know that what they did, yes, it hurt me, but what did it do to prevent the real danger from coming in and maybe obliterate me? Now, I don't want to do that anymore. I get it.
And also, and also that is why Gestalt therapy is an anarchist therapy, because as anarchists, that's what we are suggesting mainly. We're saying, okay, we are in this point of history, whatever happened.
Right.
Let's see, what can we do here? Because
Right.
if we want, here and now, we can, that's my idea here, and I will just bring it out. Let's see how it sounds. That if we would just change in what we're experiencing now as planet, the value, the values that we have, and if we would put as first value to support humanity as a community and support what is good for humanity, which is take care of humanity, animals, and nature all equally.
Right.
Then I don't know, maybe I don't know what, we wouldn't need to really create so much something new.
Right.
Just by adding the way we, this ethics to do something in favor of everyone and respecting everyone.
Right.
So I think that's the common point here.
And one way is to get rid of the name calling through diagnostic appropriation. I mean, I don't know, before the people I see can get any reimbursement from their health insurance, they're supposed to get a diagnosis. Well, I've been very reluctant to do that because from what I've said, what do? Pick up a book, read it, and from the top down, tell them what their problem is. So what I decided to do is I give them the book and I tell them to take it home for a week and look it over and find out what they think. And you know what? 9 times out of 10, they hit the nail right on the head. They know. And they said, wow, there's other people that get, I said, yeah, you're not the only one in the world with this issue. And all of a sudden they feel connected to something where they were disconnected because it was shameful to tell somebody, I'm an obsessive compulsive or whatever the hell it is. And then you can get into, well, what did it do for you to be that way? And it just starts to go out, and somewhere.
Wow, that's a great way. Bravo.
And you can go all the way out the line and say one day, well, what kind of society would you like to live in that would be helpful to you, given what you just found out about yourself? And then you start going into the other parts of self-formation, which are social issues. And you can do it very, very smoothly. I mean, a lot of therapists are still against that. They're still against wanting to deal with the politics of the environment in which and that's fine if that, but to me, it's the elephant in the treatment room. It's there. Your choice is, do you want to deal with it or don't you? And then at least they're aware that I'm choosing not to deal with it, but at least they're aware it's there. And I thought it was important, and I brought it up in the therapy.
So this is this sounds like a very, very, very nice creative adjustment of you in this system as a therapist, no?
No, right, exactly.
Very clever one, actually, and very
which enhances interaction
and very creative and funny in a good way.
Yeah, and it creates
not funny. I mean playful, actually, because you engage the client to play with the awareness, because that's the thing.
Right.
Because we're here to experience life and enjoy life, and even if we have our issues, it's so helpful to be playful with that instead of being in the drama queenism or in the narcissism, egoism, whatever.
Right. And I think the future of Gestalt is to really do what we need to do, because we certainly have the theoretical basis to do it. is to move further into the community. But
What
as
do you mean?
therapists, if we want to be certified or we want to be licensed, we've got to fit into one of these top-down organizations. For instance, it's a no-no, like, to have any kind of social relationship with a client. Why not? If we're saying we also treat the environment as part of self-formation, we're just interacting with that client in a different area that's connected to all of that.
Exactly. Me, I'm doing that when it's the ground to do it. And
right.
With some of my clients, I have become very good friends.
Right. It's part of the growth.
Exactly. And it's also easier for me because in this society that most people are unaware, if I train someone in awareness, then we have better communication. And it's a win-win because I also get to grow my community. And actually, I see my teachers, clients, however, students, I like the word students. I see us as a community because that's the thing. We are a community.
Right. And Gestalt has had a big part in that back in the 60s with the encounter groups and the different kinds of, Bud and I used to do groups for 3 days straight, the same group in different ways. And you live together and you sleep together and you wake up together and you eat together. So, normally that would be taboo in the standard kinds of therapy, but what are you going to do? Not eat for a weekend? I mean, so you're forced into kind of, and another thing I've noticed recently, now that we have to do telehealth, we can't have people in our houses or in our offices yet. I think I get to know a lot about them by looking at the picture behind them and looking at what they got around, and they see what I've got here. It's
exactly. It's nice.
Right.
That's nice.
I wouldn't want to study diet of it because I miss the face-to-face, but it's really a great advantage. And we have everything we need in our theoretical structure to be able to take it out into that area. Paul Goodman once, when he was going into private practice, by the way, he wasn't a therapist for very long. But when he was going into private practice, somebody said to him, Paul, before you open your office, how much are you going to charge? And Goodman said, I don't know. How much does an electrician make? And he wasn't joking. He meant that. You heard what he did about this booklet. He said, I'll take the money, but you send it to the War Resisters League. And unfortunately, that's why most people don't hear about Paul Goodman. He turned everybody off with it. He would protest the publisher of his own books if they banned somebody else's book. He'd be outside. So, and then when
nice.
Right. But to get to a point of where do we go from here, it's really hard to translate a lot of what went on in anarchism back in the old days where it is today. Technology, a lot of changes have occurred. So, there were two people. There was a woman who came over to America during World War II to escape the Nazis, but she wound up in the wrong part of France and she had to escape France, but she got over here. Her name is Hannah Arendt. And she looked at our Constitution, the thing that the statement, it is a wonderful Constitution. It's got a lot of anarchist philosophy to it. Problem is nobody practices it. And she said, I think if we're going to stay in America, what we have to see is that capitalism and socialism are identical twins. They wear different hats. And she said it's the energy between them that creates the best protection for a true democracy.
What did she say? That anarchy, democracy, what, can you repeat that?
She said capitalism and socialism.
Uh-huh.
Well, she just studied our Constitution. She didn't get into any other forms of communism.
Yeah.
And she said it's like a pair of identical twins, but they wear different hats. But it's the connection between them that creates the best protection for the kind of democracy you want.
Exactly, because the socialist part is the part that could be used, as we said before, when the economy is less strong, to protect everyone in humanity. But these crazy bad people are using this capacity by controlling the state and taking this help only for themselves.
Exactly.
And it's what we call the elite of 1%.
Right.
And this is very unethical behavior, obviously.
Right. And very accepted, unethical behavior.
Exactly. And that's my, and you know, okay, here I think I would like to say this, that I believe that therapists, unfortunately, have an ethical, how to say that? Wait,
responsibility.
They have an ethical responsibility. I think therapists are ethically responsible for letting humanity go to extinction. You know why? Because people, when they come to therapy, they come there to tell you, I cannot do it, you know, I cannot do it anymore to be in this society. Right. And what most therapists do is to tell them, yes, you have the problem, I will fix you and send you back to this mess.
Right.
And that is horrible in my behavior, in my opinion. That's why what I'm doing, and it's so helpful for the people, really. I mean, my clients, they will get well in the basic level, at least, very fast, because I tell them, you are right. And yes, it makes sense. And you're totally right. And, you know, they immediately, I mean, people that the psychiatrists consider them lost cases and give them pills and so on, they immediately come back to themselves immediately from the first session. And I'm shocked with that. And I'm happy. Right. And I always tell them, you are right. And that's not the world we want. And of course, I don't want to let them, you know, getting depressed and not being able to go on. And I tell them, that's how it is. You are not alone. I'm here. We are some bunch of crazy for the majority, that we understand you and we feel the same. And we feel that we should be here on this planet to support each other with love, respect, and freedom. And okay, our call is to find each other and at least build our own community/network.
Right.
At least we're not going to give up ourselves and our ethics and our healthy way to be on this planet to these crazy people.
Right. Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because Goodman, one of the things that he didn't like about doing individual therapy was just that. Because he said once, he said, you know, I have a great session with somebody, they leave. My worry is what's going to happen to them between now and the next time I see them, because that can undo a lot of what we did, because he felt that the United States at that point was just in a shambles, and it was, and still is, by the way. But you know, that there wasn't enough of what you're talking about to maintain the connection in a way that was devoid of any nurturing support in between sessions. And look what Fritz did. What Fritz did at the end of his life, he went to Canada and he formed a commune in Lake Cowichan. And that's where he...
Exactly. That's what I'm saying to my students. I'm telling them every time we finish, you know, some very nice trainings and we feel connected, I tell them, now let's start to build our community. That's the plan, actually. Right. That's the plan.
And right, and it's a plan, but it's a plan that's created and constructed, and here and now dynamics that keep changing with the tenor of the desires and the needs of the people involved, not from outside structures and demands. And you know, and I'd like to also say there was a guy that just died here. He was a poet, Lawrence Ferlinghetti. He was with the Beat Generation back in the 60s. And he died at 101. And he was an anarchist all of his life. And he decided to get rid of the name anarchists, because he said, in order for anarchy to work in a country, it needs to be filled with angels. And we don't have angels, and there's not a lot of them. So he was saying that instead of calling himself that, he calls himself a civil libertarian with anarchist sympathies. And that just fits.
Nice.
Yeah, right. So, and it will take a lot of that crap you got to wade through in order to get past the word anarchism, which drives some people just crazy because of their conditioning. And a civil libertarian with anarchistic sympathies. And the reason I was thinking of that is because of what you were saying. So if you want to start a community, you want to start people like there you go. There it is. The sympathies are anarchistic and the community is formed by that kind of a process.
Yeah,
Right?
and I want to say two more things on that. One thing is that community, it's not only ideally community that we live in the very near to each other.
Mhm.
And there are many of us, and we share, everyday parts of our everyday life, but also that's the ideal. But also what I'm saying to my clients and friends and people I want to support, community is also the fact that there's another human to listen to you and to support you. For example, in the years I was so alone after I finished my training in Gestalt, I had Bud, but he was in New Jersey and I was in Athens. But really, he was so there for me, even by email. Whenever I wanted, I could write him an email, and he was there once per week. That was my community for the time.
And
So,
by the way,
that's also
and that's where technology can be helpful. We're in
exactly.
Italy right now, and you're in Greece, and I'm in America, in the United States. So
Exactly, because I was feeling, I was looking. The reason I was so happy to find Bud is that I need a therapist that he is also an anarchist and we understand the same stuff in the social political level. So if I can find him across the world, okay, that's it. I take it. Like now with you, because
Right.
we are not a lot of people. That's why we have the plan, as I was telling you, that we create a school that we can teach Gestalt, including from the beginning the social political awareness, because that's something lost in these capitalist societies that we live, even among Gestalt people. So until then, yeah, we can of course enjoy the privilege of technology.
Right. Yeah. At least integrate it in.
Exactly.
Not make it the main. And the New York Institute of Gestalt Therapy has had that philosophy in practice since the 50s, and we're still alive. And if you want to join our community, we don't ask you what your degree is. We don't tell you what courses you have to take. We say, well, what do you want? And they'll come in and they'll see what's being offered and say this and that. And that's the way it's been running for 60 some odd years now. And it doesn't work. And we don't give awards, and we don't give marks, and we don't give grades, and we don't give diplomas, we don't give certificates. And so it's open, free, and there isn't even a place to have downward policing because there's no way to do it. You have nothing to do it with. And it's worked out beautifully. Have we had our problems in the past? Big ones. But we solved them just the way you're talking about.
Exactly.
Change this, change that. I don't mean that, and it took hard, long work. But that's what it's all about. That's
the type of school I would like also that you help me to create here in Europe, because now with this new state of reality, maybe it's not so easy that we travel there. So it's good to have another one, I don't know, here in Greece or in Europe, and we are working on that.
Good.
So how do you think, I wanted to say also this, that Gestalt, the reason we can be in a community with our clients or our friends can become our clients is that Gestalt is mainly a way of life.
Yes, right.
So actually I'm the same as a client and as a friend and as a therapist.
Right.
The difference is that when I'm a client, I am more here to take your wisdom. and I will follow your suggestions for experiments and so on. And you are here more, so I'm here more to receive. When I'm a therapist, I'm here more to give and to offer.
But it's a matter
when
of,
we are friends, we are here to do this equally, or depends. Also in friendship, sometimes someone is more the receiver and more the giver. Okay, but that's the only difference I see.
right. Well, it's also figure ground fluctuation depending upon the situation. And you can have all of those fluctuations in any situation. You don't have to be bounded by the fact that if it's a client, you can't be friendly. It's just what's in the foreground at this particular point. What's
exactly
right. And then when that's over, and then you just get that kind of rhythm, that is the rhythm of self-regulation. And not its interruptions, which a lot of is more interruptions than it is self-regulation.
Exactly. And I wanted to say something from before that I forgot, that the fact that the self is formed from the environment makes aggression so important,
Yes.
right?
Right. It is a sympathetic passion, as Paul Goodman said. It's not, if it's used properly. The point is there's been so much repression against aggression that by the time it comes out, it's got all of this unfinished business attached to it, and it comes in rage or variance. But if it's used in the destructive rather than the destruction quality, it can be, it fulfills and closes a need. Because a lot of it is a fixed gestalt. It can't be expressed because there's so many taboos against it. So once you get a chance to accept it, there's a lot in there that's going to come out.
I think this can be a good topic for our, if you agree, that we do a sequence of these recorded meetings on Gestalt and anarchism. I think we could dedicate one in self, environment, and aggression, because it's a very good one.
Okay.
And we have a lot to say. So I will save it for next time.
Okay. Do that, and you and I
we did a good start.
Okay.
Because I think these things that we're talking about is nice that they stay at least recorded, and it's nice that we feed the people, the community, the community, with this information, and especially now that we are actually practically, I consider that we are in the Third World War. So I think it's nice that we do our part on it, like our ancestors did back then. Mm-hmm. And let's see how can we help humanity. That's the plan. That's me. That's why I'm doing this job, actually, as an activist mainly.
My prediction that will happen under certain circumstances. And it would be if all the old white men in this world would just shut the fuck up.
Mm-hmm.
And let the youth take over.
Ah, yes, of course. That's always the best.
And that's what's coming.
I wish. I like that you have this. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you.
It'll be here.
Yeah, let's hope in all communities that people are ready to do that. Also in our Gestalt community. Let's see. It's not so much happening now, but we will.
Okay, let's see.
Strong suggestion.
Let's see together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for showing up, and thanks for the collaboration.
No problem.
With the youth, the rebellion youth of the Gestalt community here. And we will continue this very interesting.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay. See you next time.
Yep.
Ciao.